Thank you, Jerry. Today we're going to look at Genesis chapter 6. And before we do that, let's commit it to God in prayer. Lord in heaven, our Father, we thank you that we can read your word and we can pore over it, maybe heed its instruction. Quieten our hearts from the distraction of our lives, God, so that we can pay attention to it. We commit it into your hands, into Jesus' name. Amen. So actually this, like Jerry has told us, the last 10 days have been tough on Clorinda, and in particular tough on Judy and tough on my dad and the Peters family and the whole Clorinda Baptist Church. And I think probably a few hours before my grandma passed away, we were sitting around a few chairs and my dad was talking about the struggles and suffering that we see our loved ones go through, before they pass and so on, which got me thinking about why is there suffering in this world, not only with people who've lived their full lives, but in all parts of the world. You have kids dying in war and so on and so forth. And some of the things of what we're going to look at today might shed some light into that. Yeah, so I want to start with Noah. He is called a preacher of righteousness. You know what it was like? Matthew describes what it was like in Noah's day in Matthew 24:37 to 38. For the coming of the Son of Man, which is still to come, will be just like the days of Noah. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating, drinking, marrying, and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark. Sounds very familiar to life all around us right now. And in 2 Peter 2, Peter said, and did not spare the ancient world, but protected Noah. And watch what Noah was called here, a preacher of righteousness. So in that time and in that context of when Noah was living, he was considered a preacher of righteousness with 7 others when he, that is God, brought a flood upon the world of the ungodly. So let's pick up that story in Genesis chapter 6, verse 1 to 4. It starts, now it came about when mankind began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them. The sons of God saw that the daughters of mankind were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, whomever they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit will not remain with man forever, because he is also flesh. Nevertheless, his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of mankind, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men of old, men of renown. Now, actually, these first 4 verses here are very hotly contested in terms of what its interpretation is. So I'm not going to get into too much of the weeds of those things, but just going to say some observations. So the first thing is when mankind began to multiply on the face of the land, notice that it says it was basically during the days of rapid population expansion. And at that point in time, in Noah's time, they had very long lifespans. Remember, Adam lived 930, Seth 912, and so on. So they had a very long reproductive life. And it was during that time that the sons of God saw that the daughters of mankind were beautiful and took them as wives. There was some ungodly intermarriage. And the children born to them were regarded as mighty men of old, men of renown, and they were called the Nephilim. And then God goes on to say, my spirit will not remain with man forever. And God was not pleased with what was happening at that time. All I'll say about it is that there are 2 main views, and there may be other views as well on these verses of 1 to 4. There is a supernatural view. The supernatural view goes something along the lines of that the fallen angels had come to earth and had relations with women and had these children that are called Nephilim and so on, which does leave some unanswered questions along the lines of how can two different kinds, like a human kind and a supernatural kind like the angels, have relations and so on, and similarly, what would their children then be? What kind would they be? And so on and so forth. And a more natural view is that in Genesis chapter 4, we have the account of Cain and his descendants. And in Genesis chapter 5, we have the account of Seth and his descendants. And when Cain killed Abel, God sent Cain out of his presence, and he raised his family out of his presence. And when Seth was born, we are told that men began to call upon the name of the Lord. And in the line of Seth, we see people like Enoch, who was taken from the earth and did not face death. And then we have Noah himself. So a more naturalistic explanation goes along the lines of, or interpretation goes along the lines of, the sons of Seth took daughters from the lines of Cain. But also there are unanswered questions even with that interpretation of why would that be so wrong to bring judgment on the whole world, and also why would their children be regarded as mighty men of old, and why would they have a different name like Nephilim and so on. But in all honesty, regardless of which view you hold on these 4 verses, the important thing is not to argue about it. And sometimes there is not necessarily enough in the Bible to be able to hold firmly to one particular view. I know when I first studied this, I was leaning towards a supernatural view. Then over time, I saw some holes in that argument and went to a more natural view. And then actually my current position is I don't have a position on that, and I will wait to find out when Christ comes again. And but let's pick up in Genesis, in verse 5 of Genesis 6. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of their hearts was only evil continually. So the Lord was sorry that he had made mankind on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. Then the Lord said, I will wipe out mankind whom I have created from the face of the land, mankind and animals, as well as crawling things and the birds of the sky, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. You notice this sentence here. Wickedness of man was great on the earth, and every intent of the thoughts of their hearts was evil continually. You know, this is what pained God, and this is what grieved God. And actually, when I think about that phrase and that sentence, I don't think it's much different now, that man's heart is continually evil. The one thing that when I thought about man's condition, and we know that when Adam and Eve fell, the curse and judgment came on Adam, on Eve, on the serpent and the animals, and on all creation. And so effectively, suffering then came on all of us collectively and individually. And one of the things one of the results of Adam and Eve's fall was physical death. And we notice that on mankind's curse was also physical death. If you have a look at Genesis 3, 17 to 19, and in particular, I just wanted to focus on verse 19, but if you start in verse 17, then to Adam he said, this is God, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten from the tree about which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat from it. Cursed is the ground, so the ground got cursed as a result of this, and with hard labor you shall eat from it. So this is why we toil so hard. All the days of your life, both thorns and thistles shall grow for you. So we see the challenges in our life. You shall eat the plants of the field by the sweat of your face. You shall eat bread. And watch at the end of 19. Until you return to the ground, because from it you were taken. For you are dust, and to dust you shall return. So as I thought about why is there suffering in the world and so on, the consequence of man's fall, of Adam's fall, was that the physical body was going to return to dust of which that it was taken from. And obviously in the last 10 days, we've lost two loving people. We've lost Diane Harbour and we've lost my grandma in Shirley and Peters. And but what's amazing about them is that even though their physical bodies lies in the funeral home, but actually take comfort because they are not there. Their souls have gone. All that is there is their physical body that, like we've read now, will return to dust, you know. And I wanted to encourage us with some truths. Why is their soul no longer there and gone to heaven and so on? Jesus said in John 11:25-26, Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even if he dies. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. So their souls have never died. And then he goes on to say, do you believe this? You know? And to those watching online as well, do you believe this? In John 14:1-4, Jesus talks about going to heaven to prepare a room for them. And so Diane and Shirley have gone to their room in heaven. In John 14:1-4, it says, do not let your heart be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If that were not so, I would have told you, because I am going there. So Jesus was going there to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I am coming again and will take you to myself. Jesus has taken Diane and Shirley to himself, so that where I am, there you will also be, and you know the way where I am going. In Revelation 2:17, we are told that if those who overcome will eat hidden manna, and they will be given a new name. The one who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To the one who overcomes, I will give some of the hidden manna, and I will give him a white stone and a new name written on that stone, which no one knows except the one who receives it. So they're given new names that only they know, and God himself. In 2 Timothy 4:7-8, oh, how wonderful for the fight that they have fought. They have led, God had blessed them both with full lives on earth. It says here, it talks about the crown of righteousness. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the course. I have kept the faith, which both of them did do. In the future, there is reserved for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day. And not only to me, but also to all who loved his appearing. Oh, how wonderful. And then, well, what about us? One day we will join them, because we are also going to a wedding, to a banquet in heaven, to the marriage supper of the Lamb. In Revelation 19:7-9, let's rejoice and be glad and give glory to him, because the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his bride has prepared herself. It was given to her to clothe herself in fine linen, bright and clean. So when we get to heaven, we will be given fine linen, bright and clean. For the fine linen is the righteous acts of the saints. So the righteous acts that the Holy Spirit prompts us to do ends up being fine linen that we get to wear. Then he said to me, right, blessed are those who are invited to the wedding feast of the Lamb. We look forward, all of us, to join them in this celebration in the future when our time comes. And you know what they would have heard? They would have heard the words, remember the parable of the talents, where the master tells the servant at the end, well done, good and faithful servant. When they took their last breaths on earth, after that, those were the words that they heard when they entered God's glory in heaven. And then now, if we carry on, now in verses 9-10, these are the records of the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. What a wonderful word, righteous and blameless. Noah walked with God. Noah fathered 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now, if you watch the words here, now Noah was not perfect, right? And Noah had the same sinful state just as you and me. But what did he do? He walked with God. The words used to describe him are righteous and blameless. Did Noah live a perfect life? The answer would be no. But in Hebrews 11:7, he gets a big mention, which is where the great men of faith are mentioned. It's always been by faith through grace. Remember that. And in Noah's case, by faith, Noah, being warned by God about things not yet seen, in reverence, prepared an ark for the salvation of his household, by which he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness which is according to faith. So Noah lived in a time which is very similar to ours. People are eating, drinking, giving to marriage, and every intent of the heart is on evil. But yet Noah, without seeing what was to come, walked in reverence to God and prepared an ark that saved his family and carried on mankind. And then in verse 11 to 12, now the earth was corrupt in the sight of God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked on the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for humanity had corrupted its way upon the earth. You know, what a contrast to what God said after he created everything in the first week. Remember, God said that all that he made was very good. And here, God is seeing that and looking on earth and saying that the earth is filled with violence and is corrupt. Is the world any different now? The answer is quite emphatically no. Actually, we're told in Luke 17:26 to 27, which is very similar to what I read in Matthew 24 at the start. And just as it happened in the days of Noah, so will it also be in the days of the Son of Man. That is when the Son of Man returns. People were eating, they were drinking, they were marrying, and they were being given in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all. So we are living in a very similar time. And like what Diane and my Nana Shirley chose, they chose to put their name. The Bible makes it very clear about the book of life. And they put their names in the book of life by making Jesus the Lord of their lives, despite what was happening around them. The question is, what are you going to do? And those listening online, what are you going to do? Have you done the same? Then if we pick up from verse 13 to 22, then God said to Noah, the end of humanity has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence because of the people. And behold, I am about to destroy them with the earth. Make for yourself an ark of gopher wood. I highlighted gopher in bold because Noah is told to use this very specific material. And you shall make the ark with compartments. Effectively, compartments would be rooms to basically house everything that's going to go inside of it. And we're going to see what that is. And cover it inside and out with pitch. Now, a few years ago, I'd built a deck and I'd gotten a builder to do it. And one of the things I did with helping him as a laborer, when he put the posts into the ground, he poured bitumen all over the part of the post that was going into the ground. And this was a wooden post. And I asked why, and he said, well, this is to protect the wood and insulate it from in the part that goes into the ground from deterioration and so on. And so this is why Noah was told to use pitch, which is basically bitumen, inside and outside of the ark. And it would have also been a kind of waterproofing material. This is how you shall make it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits. 300 cubits is about 135 meters. That is a very long ark. Its width 50 cubits and its height 30 cubits. You shall make a window. Notice the word window. That will become important later when we look at Genesis, when we look at the flood story at another time. And finish it to a cubit at the top and put the door of the ark on the side. Now I also made door in bold because you're going to see who shuts the door when we look at Genesis chapter 7 another time. And you shall make it with lower, second, and third decks. Effectively, there were 3 decks. Now, behold, I myself am bringing the flood of water upon the earth to destroy all flesh in which there is the breath of life from under heaven. Everything that is on the earth shall perish. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall enter the ark, you, your sons, and your wife, and your sons' wives with you. And of every living thing, of all flesh, you shall bring 2 of every kind. So he used to take 2 of every kind into the ark to keep them alive with you. So he has a task in the ark as well, to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female. Now, we are also told in verse 20, what are they? Of the birds according to the kind, so the bird kind, of the animals according to the kind, so the animals, and every crawling thing on the ground according to its kind. 2 of every kind will come to you. Notice the words will come to you. In other words, God was bringing them to Noah to keep them alive. As for you, take for yourself some of every food that is edible and gather it to yourself, and it shall be food for you and them. So Noah said, take all the food he possibly can that is edible into the ark. So Noah did these things according to everything that God has commanded him. So he did. You know, it took Noah a very long time to build the ark. Probably something in Genesis chapter 5, we are told that he was about 500 years old when his kids were born and so on. And it was 600 years old. He was 600 when the floods came in Genesis 7. So something close to the order of about 100 years to build, or 100 years plus to build this ark. So it's a very long time to be faithful. And to be faithful where people would be laughing at you, where you're building such a huge instrument. And so Noah, we are told, is to use a very specific material, gopher. What I've got here is a life-sized photo of the ark, which was built by Answers in Genesis in the US. And the 2 little dots that you see over there are people. So some of you, like Jerry and Sylvia, who've been on like cruise ships and Judy and so on, you would have a perspective of yourself with respect to the cruise ship and so on. And so you see the ark that you see here is very different to the pictures that you'd probably seen in storybooks, where you'd have the little giraffe sticking out and being oversized for a boat and so on. And we were told that the ark was to have compartments or rooms to basically house the animals, the food, Noah and his family. He was to cover the ark, like we've talked about, in pitch. And the length was 135 meters or 300 cubits or 50 cubits, which is roughly width 23 meters, and a height of 14 meters. If you look at that height with respect to the people standing next to it, you'd get perspective. When we've talked about the decks. So effectively, we are told that God is going to bring a flood to judge all flesh, effectively flesh that has the breath of life in them. And the reason why God is doing that, because that is what sin deserves. And at that point in time, all intent of man was only on evil all the time. So that's what God did. Now we can see that it's actually not too dissimilar to what life is like right now. And we know eventually that there is going to be another judgment, effectively by fire. But we see what happened there. God literally made a way from Noah and for his family. 8 people in total that were saved. And actually, if you think about it, that is a foreshadowing of what Jesus did for us from the corruption of mankind. Like Noah was saved, similarly, we have our dear sisters in Diane and Shirley, who was also saved like that. Then we are told about God establishing a covenant with Noah. You know that God, when we make Jesus the Lord of our lives, we also enter into covenant with Him. And once He puts a seal on us, it cannot be broken. That is the assurance we have, and that is our faith, and that is our hope. We were also told Noah to bring into the ark 2 of every kind of bird, animal, and crawling kind. We can talk about that more when we look at Genesis chapter 7. And he was to take as much edible food that he can into the ark. But importantly, in the time that Noah lived, he was regarded as a preacher of righteousness and did everything that God had commanded him. We live in a similar time now. We can learn from the example of Noah to be a preacher of righteousness and to speak into our families' lives, into our communities' lives, in our workplaces, and other places that we play sport at or that we do our hobbies at, and so on. And like Noah, the Holy Spirit will prompt us to do different things and to speak into different people's lives. And the question is, and I'd like to encourage us to do it. And for those of you watching online and of anyone who has not made Jesus the Lord of their lives, the question is, what are you going to do? And a bit like what Jerry said earlier, whose hands are you putting your life in? And on that note, I conclude.